The pool is still. Even in the darkest hours of the morning, it holds a quiet sort of promise. Beneath the overhead lights, water rests heavy and undisturbed, like glass stretched across a dim stage. A soft hum from the filtration system, the faint echo of footsteps down a tiled hallway. Somewhere in those shadows, a door opens. The slight creak, not from age, but routine, and then a ripple that it begins with a toe entering the water, followed by the slow curve of a foot, calf, thigh. A figure descends half child, half silhouetted, till she slips completely beneath the surface, an apparition of purpose. At this hour, there are no coaches shouting, no fans clapping, no stopwatches counting time, just a girl, and the water she moves as though she's always belonged there, as though the lane lines had been drawn for her before she was born. Not with urgency, but with rhythm. Motion without a beginning or end, as though the body had always known how to glide, over and over. Arms stretch forward and pull. Head turns, breath, kick. Again, to speak of greatness, we so often summon noise. Voices raised, crowds roaring, headlines written in ink bold enough to bleed. But not her, not Katie. Hers is a different story, wrapped not in spectacle but in silence. This is a story about a girl who never chased the spotlight, who never felt the need to point or shout or gesture. A story told in early mornings, in the measured breath before a tumble turn, in the 5 a.m. alarm that never went unanswered. Perhaps when we look for legends, we look in the wrong places. We watch the winner's podium, we watch the medals being placed. But maybe legend first takes shape in that vast, empty stillness before the rest of the world wakes up. She was born on a spring day in Washington, D.C. March 17th, 1997. A quiet date, unremarkable in the way most days begin, but like all days, it offered something few noticed, something not meant to be obvious. From the very beginning, Katie Ledecky came not with thunder, but with tide. When she was 6 years old, her mother enrolled her in swim lessons, not to build a champion, but to give her daughter another way to play. Mary Jen, herself a former collegiate swimmer, recognized not the talent at first, but the affinity, a curiosity with the water, a kind of comfort. There are children who learn to swim, and then there are children who remember. Katie remembered. She took to it the way vines climb fences, not fast, but with purpose, always upward, always forward. It was not her speed they saw at first. It was her form, her calm, her ability to repeat a lap 100 times without frustration or fatigue or fuss. The clock mattered little. Her presence mattered more. Early coaches tell the same story in different words. They watched her swim and saw a kind of energy they couldn't name, silent resolve, a patience with herself unmatched, uncanny for her age. She didn't cut corners, didn't demand praise, never raced the child in the next lane, never questioned the structure. In time, her body grew with intentional long limbs, wide shoulders, muscles sculpted not for display but for utility. But even before that transformation, she already had something most could not emulate. She remembered the water, how it moved, how to enter it gently, how never to fight it. Those early mornings became ritual. Before dawn, she would wake, brush her teeth, eat quietly. Her brother would drive her to the pool sometimes. No words were needed, just the shared silence of siblings up too early, bonded not by noise, but by motion, under the blue lights of the pool deck. There was a hum in the air, low, steady, peaceful, chlorine mixed with the cold bite of winter dawn. All around her, the cities were silent, schools were empty, the news hadn't started yet. And somewhere beneath it all, Katie was swimming. It wasn't spectacular, it was ordinary in presentation, but somewhere within that ordinariness, a phenomenon stirred. Her coach, at the time Yuri Sugiyama, recalls not a moment of grand revelation, but 100 moments stitched together. She just didn't miss, he once said in an interview. She always showed up, always finished. The set always gave the water what it asked for. At an age when most kids gurgled complaints about early mornings or long practices, she simply carried on. She didn't wallow in soreness, didn't dwell on failures, didn't daydream about gold medals. She showed up, and she swam. Maybe that is what endurance looks like when it begins. Not a grand gesture, a quiet showing up, again and again and again. And yet, it wasn't robotic. It wasn't joyless. She loved it. That's the part that surprised people most when they asked. She loved the feel of water against her skin, loved the silence of being submerged, loved the quiet architecture of a pool. Coaches noticed her smile, not jubilant, not detached but present, subtle. Ernest thought Katie would swim a 400-meter test set and emerge, hair dripping, cheeks pink with exertion, and simply nod. No celebration, no complaint, just readiness. For whatever came next, it was this discipline, cloaked not in toughness, but in tenderness, that slowly began to reveal what might be possible at her age level. She began setting records without realizing it. Her times, one by one, crept into national top tens, but she barely seemed to mind. Each accolade arrived like a postcard, sealed with a smile, tucked into a drawer. Then, back to the water. People began whispering, something about this girl is different. But in Bethesda, Maryland, among the green lawns and curved driveways, life continued as before. Her school days were filled with classes and notebooks, her nights with homework and early bedtimes. Her friends liked her for her kindness, not for her stroke rate. Teachers remembered her for her listening skill. She didn't brag. She rarely mentioned the things she was beginning to accomplish. This was not a tale placed on billboards. It lived in the in-betweens, the 5-second pause between sets, the gratitude when handed a water bottle, the flickering smile at the end of a hard workout. The years passed, and summer left its golden fingerprints across outdoor practices. Fall followed, with later sunrises and the return of indoor echoes. Winter pressed its icy breath against locker, room windows, and spring again brought flowers and faster times. Through it all, Katie endured, not dramatically, not insistently, but steadily. If greatness could be charted not by peaks, but by plateaus etched, not in fire, but in slow-drawn ink, it might look like this: a girl in a pool, 1,000 mornings, and not a single one wasted. The neighborhood holds its breath in the stillness before dawn. Bethesda, Maryland, sleeps under a cover of mist and suburban hush. The lawns are wet with dew, the streets empty but for newspaper carriers and the occasional jogger whose footsteps echo like distant applause. Behind shuttered windows, lights are yet to flicker on. It's a quiet pocket of the world, quiet enough that the rhythm of a pool filter ticking on becomes a kind of drumbeat. Somewhere in that quiet, a girl is already lacing her shoes. Inside the pool facility, the warmth of chlorinated air contrasts the bite from outside. Fluorescent bulbs hum softly overhead. The tiles glisten with memory of yesterday's laps, of last year's drills, of beginnings. You can almost hear the pulse of habit in the way doors open and close, in the shuffle of sneakers across wet floors, each action rehearsed, not for spectacle, but for practice. For presence. Katie Ledecky is 11 years old, slender and quiet, with a long ponytail tied tight behind her head. She does not enter a room like a comet, but more like fog, soft, all-encompassing, unnoticed until it's already there. She doesn't say much. She never really did. Words aren't how she shows up. Motion is. Years later, her earliest coaches would recall how she displayed no singular flash of brilliance, not all at once. There was no dramatic wind that made them gasp, no rebellious tempo that puffed egos or headlines. What they noticed instead was a sort of steadiness, a poise, a girl who treated every drill with quiet dignity, whether it was a sprint or a long shoulder-burning endurance set. Her family speaks the same language. They embrace calm. Her Uncle John, known in the world of business and professional sports, always says she had a maturity about her even in elementary school. She never tried to be older than she was. She simply moved through the world with clear eyes and gentle steps. Her mother, Mary Jen, saw something too, not ambition exactly, but alignment, a rare kind of clarity. The water didn't pull Katie. Katie simply belonged to it. At the Palisades Swim and Tennis Club, where her early strokes took shape, there was something meditative about the way she crossed the lanes. Not fast, not loud, just fluid. Again and again. Hour after hour, yard after yard. There was no drama in her swimming, no flare of arms or gasp for air. It was all contained, quiet, purposeful. Much later, on a national stage, analysts would break down her technique into physics and frame counts. But at this age, it felt less like science and more like instinct, as though her bloodstream ran in lap intervals, as though her heartbeat remembered the pace of a 100-meter warm-up. Katie grew up like any kid. School days filled with recess and reading logs, afternoons with friends, family dinners. But while most children dreamt in cartoons and sugar fantasies, Katie built her world around intervals and expectations. Small goals, achievable ones. There was no grand vision yet, no plans, just the afternoon practice that waited, and the stroke she could always refine. Sometimes success is planted quietly, like seeds that wait for just the right morning to grow, and Katie was a seed tended not by fireworks, but by repetition. Her first coach, Yuri Sugiyama, will forever note it wasn't talent he saw right away, was rhythm, an understanding of pace, of timing, of when to push and when to hold back. These were lessons that swimmers often spent years trying to memorize. Katie seemed born with them, while her classmates collected video game consoles or birthday party invites. She collected early alarms. Her calendar filled not with dances or soccer games, but meet schedules and swim times. Yet she bore no resentment, not even silently. She seemed to want all of it. The soreness and the solitude. The sets that left her arms trembling, and the satisfaction that followed. She never made it a performance. She never asked others to notice, and, somehow, they always did. By the end of middle school, she had begun to slip into national rankings, quietly, as one might enter a library aisle. Her name appeared alongside older girls, future Olympians. Coaches leaned in, squinted, wondering. Ledecky, who is that? She kept swimming, 5 a.m. remained a given. Turbulent stretches of pool water marked her days more than any calendar could. In time, her family grew used to it, not proud in the showy way, but reverently. Her brother would wait outside the locker room without complaint. Her parents would sip coffee in silence by the side of the deck. A small ecosystem of belief formed around her. They didn't push, they simply supported as her practice groups rotated, and the swimmers around her came and went as kids. Sometimes douchey remained. In every rotation, in every set, in every chill morning when eyes stung from chlorine and lungs panted with pain, she remained. The quiet ones are often hardest to judge. Without theatrics, without declarations, people don't always know where to place them. But greatness leaves clues, even in low volume. There was the way her cap never slipped out of place. The way her splits stayed consistent from the first 25 to the last. The way she exhaled just slightly longer than the rest, as though she had mastered the art of patience. On land and in water, one of her early mentors likened her to a metronome placed underwater, not just because her pace was perfect, but because her calm was built in a sport built on variables, on milliseconds and marginal gains. She swam like someone untouched by chaos. And it wasn't that she never had bad days. They all did. Days where she swam slower than expected, where muscles felt too heavy, where turns didn't land just right. But she absorbed those days with grace lessons, not laments. She processed, incorporated, adjusted, without a fuss. Without drama. It was her consistency that startled most. Not the spikes, but the line. By the age of 13, Katie was starting to qualify for elite meets, rubbing shoulders, not intentionally, with swimmers 5, 6, even 10 years older. She gave little mind to the difference. Age didn't bind her mindset. The clock told her everything she needed. At meets like the Eastern Zone, whispers began rising among coaches and competitors alike. Did Ledecky swim that 800 again? She dropped how many seconds? She's only in 8th grade. But it wasn't the time or place for predictions. Katie never encouraged them. Even then, as her fingers brushed against records and qualifying standards, she didn't carry herself as a prodigy. She carried herself as a student of the water, still learning, still listening. That may be the hidden key to her rise, not a mind built to conquer, but a mind built to listen, to herself, to her body, to the instructions that every pool, in every town, in every morning, slowly whispered to her. Keep pulling, keep breathing, keep going, and she did. The pool water looks the same as it always does, clear, unwavering, steady. But sometimes, beneath the usual calm, something unusual waits. It's summer in Omaha, Nebraska. The air is warm, the sun sharp on the deck of the CenturyLink Center, and inside its cooled expanse, the US Olympic swimming trials unfold like pages in a storybook. Swimmers are everywhere, esting, pacing, preparing athletes at the peak of their powers. And among them, a 15-year-old girl ties the straps of her swim cap, glances toward the lanes, and breathes as if this is all perfectly natural, because to her 'tis dot. Katie Ledecky is not a favorite. She is not the face on posters or the name on every analyst's list. She is here almost by invitation of possibility. A young girl who made a qualifying time just weeks earlier, standing in a sea of names that come with history, experience, expectation, but she's not in awe. Nor is she worried. Not really. She walks slowly across the deck, adjusts her goggles, and looks at the water not with arrogance, but with familiarity. She has seen so many pools, and this one is still just water. The 800-meter freestyle is considered a veteran's event, grueling, tactical, unforgiving, cut from long cloth and stitched with lactic acid. No one looks to the youngest swimmer in the final heat and thinks, this is her race, until the race begins. From the start, it is clear that Katie is not here to keep up. She is here to lead. With long, efficient strokes that barely disturb the surface, she pulls forward not in a rush, not in panic, but with a calm that unnerves even seasoned eyes. 100 meters in, some shift in their seats. At 200, murmurs begin. 800 meters, 32 lengths of the pool. And she leads every one of them. It is not the suddenness that surprises people, it is the steadiness, like a tide that keeps arriving. Relentless, quiet, unmistakable. When she touches the wall, the silence in the building collapses into applause, astonished, disoriented, captivated applause. Katie turns, pushes her goggles to her forehead, and blinks up at the scoreboard. Time reads 8 minutes, 19 seconds, and 78 milliseconds. A new personal best. She is going to London. They invite her to the press room. They ask her how she feels. I'm just excited to go, she says, in a voice that's light and unshaken. I want to swim fast, that's all. And quietly, she returns to her seat. No spin, no shout. No spectacle in the weeks leading to London. Voices begin to gather. Journalists study tape. Coaches trade predictions. Swimming forums hum with speculation. Who is this girl? Where did she come from? Katie, unchanged by the swarm of attention, keeps practicing, keeps swimming her sets. Her body holds the repetitions well. Her focus never wavers. Her coach, Yuri, keeps telling people she might not be the fastest every day, but she's the most dependable swimmer I've ever coached. The Olympic Village is a buzz of color and chaos. Flags hang from balconies. Athletes drift through the cafeteria like bright pieces in a giant puzzle. And in a quiet room on the 3rd floor, Katie Ledecky reads a paperback novel before bed. She's sharing a space with older swimmers, seasoned Americans who have seen more, lived more, swum more. And still, she doesn't shrink. She listens when it's her time to race. She walks behind the blocks with the calm of someone stepping into class. No nerves, just attention. She waves once to her parents, quietly, then turns toward the pool. The final of the women's 800-meter freestyle at London 2012 begins. And from the first stroke, something changes in the air. The race. Commentators try to modulate their tones, but one can sense the quickening pace behind their voices. Katie Ledecky, the 15-year-old outsider, is not simply leading this Olympic final. She is commanding it. 500 meters in, she is ahead. At 600 meters, she is alone. No shadows trail her. No ripple reaches forward. She is creating clean water with every movement. She has transformed the race into a soliloquy. The camera angles shift frantically, trying to include the others. The crowd, uncertain at first, now cheers louder with each passing lap. And when she touches the wall 8 minutes 14 seconds and 63 milliseconds, it's not just a gold medal. It's the second fastest performance in history. She looks up, her face still as though she just finished morning practice. She breathes, blinks, nods. Minutes later, she stands on the podium, gold around her neck, the stars and stripes rising. As applause shakes the stadium, she simply smiles, a small curve of the lip, chest rising slightly with breath. She doesn't cry, she doesn't point to herself, she just looks, quietly, at the flag. It's the kind of wind that usually rewrites narratives, but she resists being remade. She goes home to Bethesda, resumes her high school classes, writes essays, studies for tests. Her friends ask about London. She tells them it was cool. Someone asks what she'd do now. She shrugs, keeps swimming. The media tries to stretch the story into something more dramatic. But there is no drama in her voice. She laughs easily, says her favorite pre-race snack is chocolate milk. She is not trying to astonish. She already did that, quietly, behind the noise. Of medals, there are deeper notes ones only a few can hear. The speech of underwater rhythm, the solitude of excellence lived in shadows. She walks through high school halls in a hoodie, waves to teachers she's known for years. She still goes to bed early, still wakes before the sun. And each morning that follows London, she keeps going to the pool, because nothing, not even Olympic gold, has changed what she loves most. The water, it's still there, holding its breath in the early light, and so is she. The years between Olympic Games are often called the quiet sickle months that stretch long across calendars, filled not with fireworks, but with fundamentals. And for Katie Ledecky, these were the years where silence shaped supremacy. After London, the world expected her next move. Would she falter under fame? Would the pressure change her? But Katie returned to Bethesda like a leaf returning to ground, steady, undisturbed. She was still in high school, still folding laundry, still filling in notebooks with pencil marks, her writing neat and even, still rising with the dark to drive to early swims. The gold medal didn't warp her schedule. If anything, it reinforced it. 2013 arrived with little fanfare, but in the pool, something had shifted. Katie was no longer the surprise. Now she was the standard. And while the world looked to her for another miracle, she simply went back to training. The World Championships in Barcelona were her first stage after London. And though eyes now followed with purpose, she did not tense beneath their weight. Analysts sharpened pens, coaches tracked turns and tempos. Other swimmers measured themselves against her shadow. But Katie came not to defend, not to prove, she came to execute. In Barcelona, she competed in 4 events. She won gold in all 4. She set 2 world records in the process in the 800 and the 1500 meter freestyles, and anchored a relay with poise beyond her years. Commentators tried again to find the angle, to define what made her different, but the truth rarely makes headlines. She was simply doing the work, stroke by stroke, day by day. Between meets, Katie's training intensified. 60,000 meters a week, twice a day practices, sets that made even elite swimmers hesitate. Distance repeats with 100-meter intervals threaded between and through it all. She rarely broke pace. Her coach, Bruce Gemmell, was not effusive by nature, but when it came to Katie, he often struggled to mask a grin. She doesn't just swim to win, he would say quietly, more to himself than to a microphone. She swims to be exact, to get everything ... right. In 2014, she competed in the Pan-Pacific Championships in Gold Coast, Australia. Once again, people predicted good results. Once again, she left with gold. Her margins of victory were not narrow edges, they were full chapters apart. In the 400-meter freestyle, she beat the field by several seconds. In the 800 and 1500, her command stretched further. Observers noted how she never sprinted. She never needed to. Her cruising speed was already faster than most could reach. And still, outside the pool, she remained disarmingly normal. Quiet, but approachable. Polite, punctual. Still smiling at the same jokes her friend group had recycled since freshman year. Back home in Bethesda, her teachers described her as focused, sincere. She missed some school for travel but always made up the work. Her classmates didn't see her as the swim star. They saw Katie, their friend, their lab partner, just as likely to ask about homework as she was to reach the podium. There was an effortlessness to how she absorbed it, all the glory, the grind, the attention, the humility. But beneath that ease was a structure as meticulously built as a cathedral. Every swim anchored in discipline. Every routine weighed in quiet intention. 2015 brought her to cousin. Russian Other World Championship, another test. Again, the results were staggering. 5 events entered, 5 gold medals earned, 3 world records broken, including a lifetime best in the 1500-meter freestyle that journalists later called almost unfathomable. But for Katie, the number wasn't the story. What mattered was the turn she finally nailed on the 3rd lap. The breathing pattern she adjusted after practice. The rhythm she carried from Tuesday's drill into Saturday's final dot in interviews. That year, her answers did not grow in grandeur. What are you most proud of? A reporter asked after a dominant week. She thought for a moment, then replied, I stayed on tempo. I felt in control. She wasn't chasing crowds. She was chasing clarity. By now, her name had become magnetic in the swimming world. Young athletes bought goggles she endorsed. Boys and girls analyzed her stroke online, trying to mimic her catch, her angle, her signature glide. And yet, Katie still trained without spectacle. Each stroke still traced the line between shoulders and silence. Each day began with a simple alarm tone. Each evening ended with the feel of soreness that hummed like a lullaby. Her teammates often marveled not at her performances, but at how little they changed her. She cheered from the side of the pool during their heats. She volunteered to pick up extra towels. She remembered to ask how others were doing. Dominance did not distance her from those around her. If anything, it drew her closer. When asked about her legacy, she would smile lightly and shift focus. I'm just trying to get better, she'd say. That's the main goal, just to improve. By late 2015, the conversation began to shift in tone. It was no longer whether she would succeed. The question became, how close can she come to perfection? Preparations for Rio began quietly. She and Bruce met often, not just to plan training blocks, but to reflect, to recalibrate. Each race was studied, slowed down, turned in the hand like a stone one makes smooth with time. As winter arrived, so did the intensity. Sets stretched longer, paces tightened. The effort pressed against limits, not just of physicality, but of focus and still, even in fatigue. Katie's swim wasn't rigid. It was music. Each kick, each pull, struck a chord. At training camps, whispers returned. Even amongst Olympians, she stood apart not just for speed, but for stability. She rarely missed a send-off. Her splits barely drifted. Her breath control was flawless. Her style remained unmistakable. One by one, competitors and commentators surrendered their superlatives and simply called her what she was, relentlessly excellent. And as the lead up to Rio narrowed from months to weeks, Katie kept waking with the first light, kept swimming sets without complaint, kept writing her story not in promises, but in pace. No headlines, No declarations, only water and the sound of a girl cutting through it. Again and again and again. South America breathes differently. There is a humming to the air in Rio de Janeiro, as if its rhythms have been shaped by centuries of waves and song. The morning pours gold over Copacabana and drapes Sugarloaf Mountain in softened light. August of 2016, the city wakes early. Its streets teem with the anticipation of the Olympic Games. Somewhere amid the color and clamor, Katie Ledecky rises. She breathes in the warm hush of her room, just as she has in every city before. The curtain lifts slightly with the coastal breeze, and outside, the Atlantic stretches wide. But inside, within Katie, there is only calm. She ties her hair back, opens the zipper of her Team USA jacket, and walks to the waiting day without rush or resistance. These games are different. She is different. This is not a surprise swim. This isn't a fairy tale of the unknown. This is the return of the reigning. For years since London, for years in which she has conquered everything the swimming world placed before her, yet somehow she has remained untouched by ego, unswayed by the weight of attention. In Rio, the pressure is no longer hypothetical. She is expected to win, again and again and again, and quietly she does. The first race is the 400-meter freestyle. She strides to the blocks with the same soft intensity she has always carried. And when the buzzer sounds, she enters the water. Like a line of poetry sliding across a page, clean, measured, inevitable. Her lead builds with every stroke, and by the halfway mark, there is no doubt. At the finish, she touches the wall. 3 minutes, 56.46 seconds, a new world record. Again, her face remains composed. Just a flicker of a smile as she surfaces. She's not exulting. She's exhaling. Interviews follow, lights flash. She repeats the same refrain. I'm happy with that race. I felt strong the whole way. But happy, for her, is not exuberant. It is exact, in the athlete's village she is studied. By rising stars, by teammates, even by rivals. But she remains unchanged. She plays cards with other swimmers. She naps between heats. She writes in her journal and stops for every signature request. What escapes the cameras is where Katie always thrives. The pre-race silence. The moment before marshalling, when nerves swirl in the air. But Katie sits easy. Not stoic, grounded. Not bracing, balanced. Next, the 200-meter freestyle. This is her most contested event, her closest field. But even here, when competitors close in, when bodies churn the water in tight lanes, Katie retains her form. She breathes into the last 50 meters with a sense of inevitability, not arrogance, a finale sujet. A lunge at the wall, gold, again. I like this one, she says afterwards, content. That one felt a little bit gritty, and that's it. No theatrics, no boasting, just a swimmer, tuned to the chords of effort. The 4x200-meter freestyle relay arrives next. It isn't just about her now, it's about legacy shared. Her teammates line up, eyes narrowed, adrenaline high. Katie anchors. When the touch comes from the third leg, she plunges into the water behind a trailing lead. But 200 meters is enough for her to write her own ending. She pulls ahead with every turn, with every meter. When she slaps the wall, it's a crescendo not of sound, but of skill. Team USA wins. Another gold. Her teammates laugh and hug and jump at the edge of the pool. Katie smiles too wide this time. Joy shared is allowed to be louder, but it is the 800-meter freestyle that casts the longest shadow. This is her signature event, the distance that introduced her to the world in 2012, and the one she has owned ever since. This time, in Rio, the expectations are towering. Most swimmers would worry, would calcify under the pressure. But not Katie. She prepares, as always, drinks chocolate milk, warms up quietly, listens to the lap counter inside her mind. When she steps to the blocks, the hush is thick, and then the gun. She doesn't explode out of the gate. She slips in like clockwork, like returning to a quiet room she's known since childhood. 50 meters in, she leads. 200 meters in, the lead is clearer. 400, unstoppable. 750 meters. The field is gone when she touches at 8 minutes, 4.79 seconds. The time is so fast it erases context. She has broken her own world record by nearly 2 full seconds. It is the widest gold medal margin in Olympic women's 800-meter freestyle history. People yell, analysts stand stunned. The venue thunders. Katie adjusts her swim cap. Breathes and smiles. Later, a reporter asks her how the swim felt. It felt great, she says. Just felt like training. And in Rio, the whispers crescendo into a chorus. The greatest distance swimmer, perhaps, ever. What strikes people most is how preserved she remains. No brandishes of superiority, no moments of grandeur demanded. Her greatness doesn't seek spotlight, it creates it. She finishes her Olympic schedule with 5 medals, 4 gold, 1 silver from the 4x100-meter freestyle relay, earned alongside teammates whose sprinting feet touched water faster, if only slightly. But medals were never the melody of her story. Precision was poised, and perhaps something even more rare, joy with no performance. Grace without conditions. On her last night in Rio, she sits on the beach with a few teammates, sand between toes, ocean murmuring its infinite lullaby. The cameras have left, the stadium's quieted. Katie wraps herself in a hoodie and leans back. No dreams of gold, just the sound of water, just the stars overhead. Asked someday about her experience in Rio, she will say it wasn't about the records. It just felt like swimming well, she'd tell them. And that will be the truth. Because for Katie Ledecky, greatness has always sounded the same. Like breath in the morning, like laughter after the meet, like silence just before your feet leave the block, like water remembering your name. The decision seems quiet from the outside. Another swimmer enrolling in college, another name atop a recruitment chart. But for Katie Ledecky, the choice to go to Stanford was more than academic. It was a reset, a recentering, a declaration. Not with headlines, but with habit. She did not go pro. She did not chase endorsements or turn her name into a brand. Instead, she folded her medals into the pages of yesterday and chose the classroom. Biology lectures, dorm room routines, carded student ID hoodies with the Stanford S printed across the front. She walked brick paths under California's sun with the same long effort grace she brought to the pool. It wasn't reinvention, it was continuance, a quieter lane for someone who had already spoken volumes with her silence. At Stanford, she joined one of the most storied collegiate swim programs in the country. Teammates who had grown up admiring her now trained beside her, but she never carried herself as a star. She was there to learn, to grow, to push herself, to keep building, stroke by stroke. Coach Greg Meehan regarded her with steady eyes. He didn't mold her. He listened to her rhythms and helped her hear them more clearly. Training shifted, not into frenzy, but nuance. The mountain wasn't steeper, now was different. weighted with academics, imbued with obligation, threaded with a social world that pulsed beneath lecture halls and library stacks. She adapted classes in human physiology, chemistry labs, late-night study sessions in the hum of dormitory common rooms. Katie absorbed them all. When people asked how she balanced Olympic aspirations with academics, she simply shrugged. "You just manage it," she said once. "You write down what needs to be done, then you do it." Simple, not easy. Through it all, she continued to swim. NCAA competitions brought cheer squads and packed stands. Collegiate rivals were younger, faster than they'd ever been. But she handled it with the same quiet composure she'd held since Bethesda at the 2017 NCAA Championships. Her first year competing for Stanford, Katie claimed 3 individual titles: the 500-yard freestyle, the 1650-yard freestyle, and the 200-yard freestyle. She broke American records in every one, but records were no longer a surprise, not even to her. What impressed those watching wasn't speed, but consistency, control. A swimmer who moved with exactitude, never overreaching, never flailing toward victory, just locating her rhythm and staying inside it. Teammates called her grounding. After practice, she helped carry kickboards back to bins. She celebrated others' victories more loudly than her own. And when she spoke at team dinners, always briefly, always lightly, it was with gratitude woven into every word. But even in grace, the weight gathered. In 2017 and 2018, international meets returned. The World Championships, the Pan Pacs. Katie returned with medals gold after gold, but the world too had changed. Rivals closed the gap. Voices online began dissecting her. Every swimwear was the floor. Was she slowing? Was this the peak? She ignored the distractions. But inside, she knew something was stirring. The days were longer now. The chapters of her life intersecting. Training, travel, study, obligation, expectation. Fatigue entered the equation, not loudly, but like a shadow edge curling into light dot at the 2019 World Championships in Gwangju, Korea. That shadow became form. Early rounds started well enough, but whispers curled at the edges. Katie didn't look quite right. In one preliminary swim, she finished slower than expected. By the finals, she appeared pale, weary. The press speculated. Something was wrong. And quietly, Katie withdrew from events. Later, it was revealed she had been battling an illness, dehydration, energy loss, perhaps more. But she didn't elaborate. She never blamed. She quietly returned for the 800-meter final, where she clawed through fatigue, perhaps more than pain, to win a silver. Her first loss at a major international meet in nearly a decade. She did not hang her head. She did not argue. She simply congratulated the winner, shook hands, and stood on the podium with the same earnest, steady gaze she'd worn since London. Still, the world watched, waiting for a narrative. But Katie offered none. Greatness, she seemed to say, isn't about invincibility. It's about what you do when you're no longer certain. And then came silence, not personal, but global. In early 2020, the world halted. The COVID-19 pandemic swept across continents like a tide no one could outswim. The Olympics were postponed. Pools closed. Training regimens collapsed under public health advisories and mandates. Katie, like athletes everywhere, was faced with stillness. But inactivity is not idleness. Not for her. She adapted. Built an outdoor pool loop in a backyard. Swam where she could, borrowed lanes, small spaces, makeshift setups. She trained with resistance bands on carpeted floors. She ran dryland circuits in grass. Her routines became more solitary. Her mindset, if possible, more stable, without the anchor of competition. She found her way back to the core, the love of swimming not as stagecraft, but as craft. Every stroke a study, every movement a meditation. She spoke openly during this time, in interviews carried through Zoom and shaky webcam feeds. She spoke of perspective, of learning to embrace the pause, of checking in with teammates, parents, herself. "I miss the rhythm," she said once, "but I've found other kinds of rhythm too." Her voice never cracked. Her posture never sank. And when Olympic training resumed slowly, cautiously she returned to the water with soft eyes, focused breath, and allegiance not to winning, but to presence. She built herself back, not dramatically, not in press releases, quietly, through laps unseen, through mornings unshod, through effort undetected except by the surface of the water. The year became 2021. The world wore a different face. And Katie Ledecky just slightly did too. Stronger, older, not in years necessarily, but in trust, in endurance, in the depths of what it meant to keep going. Even when everything else stopped, she packed her bag once more, wrote her name in permanent ink on the tag, and headed for Tokyo, not to reclaim glory, not to silence doubters, but simply to swim, just like always. The Olympic Games arrive without fanfare this time. Tokyo is still. The stadiums echo softly with limited crowds, masked spectators, muffled cheers. The clamor of past years is absent, replaced by a reverent hush like a museum more than an arena. The pandemic has changed everything, but one lane remains the same, the water, and in that water, Katie Ledecky prepares to swim. For the first time in nearly a decade, questions surround her. Is she still the greatest? Has the field finally caught up? Is time, that ever-chasing shadow, beginning to close the gap? Katie doesn't speak to these questions, not because she avoids them, but because they were never the questions that mattered to her. The 200-meter freestyle comes first, a test of speed, of edge, of timing sharpened to the second. Across the pool, her new rival weds Ariane Titmus of Australia. Young, strong, hungry. The race begins, and Katie moves as she always has, graceful, measured. But something is different. Titmus surges ahead in the final meters. The touch goes to her. Gold for Australia, silver for another. Katie finishes fifth. Around the world, shock ripples. As the rain ended, but Katie walks calmly out of the pool. She nods toward the cameras. She congratulates her competitor with a genuine smile. She doesn't throw goggles, doesn't gesture. She breathes and continues. In the mixed zone interviews that follow, reporters search for a headline and expression of frustration, a hint of disappointment. What they find instead is balance. "I gave it everything I had," Katie says. "I'm proud of that." That night, she doesn't isolate herself. She eats dinner with teammates. She checks in on her younger counterparts, reminding them to hydrate, to stretch, to rest. The loss doesn't unmake her. It unfolds her further. 2 days later, the 400-meter freestyle. Again, Titmus looms in the lane beside her. Again, the cameras fixate on the rematch. In a race that unspools like thread pulled taut, the two swim almost stroke for stroke. It comes down to the final touch. Titmus again takes gold. Katie silver dot, and yet something in the frame shifts. The camera catches the moment Katie surfaces, not with anguish, but with peace. She taps the water once, gently. The world grows louder with opinions, but she stays quiet in private. She tells her coach, "I raced well. That was a good swim. I can't control anyone else." It's not resignation, it's realism, wrapped in grace. Then the 1500-meter freestyle arrives. For the first time, the women's field will compete in this distance at the Olympic level, recognition of endurance, of equality. And at the frontier of that distance stands Katie, Ledecky. 1500 meters. 30 lengths of the pool. She leads from the first, quietly, unflinching. The commentators try to infuse drama, but there is none to be found. She holds the lead, like she has always held it, without noise, without despair, with nothing but the certainty of rhythm. She glides, lap after lap, and when she touches, there is no need to look. She knows gold, her first of these games. When she emerges, there's no victory yell, no fist to the sky, just a low smile, quiet and full, in the press room. Someone asks if this one feels different. After falling short in the shorter races, she nods. Every medal means something, but this one's historic, and I got to be part of it. Then comes the 800-meter freestyle, the anchor to a decade of excellence. The one race that has always been hers. The buzz returns. Can she do it again? Titmus has closed in. The world is younger now, but Katie doesn't flinch. From the start, she takes control, not with a burst, but a claim. Her pace smooth. The tone, she builds a lead, stroke after stroke, breathing at exactly the right moments, turning perfectly on every wall by the halfway point. It's clear Katie Ledecky still owns this race. She finishes strong, hits the wall. Gold, her final individual swim in Tokyo, and she has done what few imagined, reclaimed her distance throne, affirmed it with patience. When she walks away from the pool, the story has changed, not from dominance to defeat, but from dominance to grace. She mentions nothing of proving people wrong. Instead, she says, "I love this. That's why I do it." That's the chord, repeated over and over in the Olympic stands. Other swimmers watch in awe. Coaches nod in respect. Competitors stand beside her, proud to have shared water. Katie, as always, says little. Her body language speaks more clearly, a strong postured thank you to the lane ropes, a reassuring glance to her teammates. She closes her games with 2 golds and 2 silvers, to some. That marks a dip. To history. It marks resilience, because in these games, she did not have the weight of invincibility. She had the presence of legacy, and in that space, unafraid and undeterred, she not only swam, she taught. The morning begins where it always has, the pool's edge. The lane ropes stretch, like punctuation marks in a sentence that has no end. The water holds a soft shimmer, stirred only by light and memory. Years have passed since a girl first stepped into this quiet, tiled cathedral, and still, in its hush, that girl remains. Katie Ledecky's story was never built for noise. Some athletes burn to be seen, to speak loudly, to wear ambition on their sleeves. But Katie whispered her name into the sport through ritual, through rhythm, through reverence. She never entered water to take attention, only to listen. And the water listens back, from the suburban lanes of Bethesda to the soaked decks of Olympic podiums. The melody of her career has always been discipline wrapped in calm, windless, measured. Her greatness never unfolded in neon, but in the slow, sure repetition of mornings. No one witnessed and sets no one recorded. We remember the medals, of course. They're etched in lists and leaderboards, gold stacked upon gold. But those are echoes. The core lives elsewhere, in the breath before a flip turn, in the faint clatter of goggles set neatly on tile, in the act of returning, not once, not twice, but thousands of times, without complaint, without spectacle. Katie's legacy isn't built from one perfect moment, it's built from 1,000 silent ones. After Tokyo, the echoes pursue her, the critics fade, the admirers grow. She returns home, and still, she wakes before the light. She trains. She speaks to young swimmers. She refines her stroke. She holds seminars not from a pedestal, but from a pool bench. Towel resting on her shoulders. Smiles soft as steam. There is no entitlement in her posture, only gratitude. She gives her time to causes that matter, lends her voice to education. 2 young women in sport, not booming, not boastful, but consistent, clear, intentional. Over time, her voice changes, not in tone, but in reach. She begins to mentor, to teach. What once was her silent engine becomes a shared map. She shows others that brilliance isn't only in speed, it is in preparedness, in humility, in learning to love not just the race, but the repetition. And slowly, those who follow begin to echo her rhythm, to rise early, to speak softly, to race fiercely, not for crowd or crown, but for the perfect alignment of movement with meaning, because Katie Ledecky never swam the loudest, she swam the truest. The records came, and one day they'll fall. That is the nature of sport. Faster hands, stronger legs, brighter futures. That is the gift of passing down something pure. The water, after all, holds no jealousy. But legacy is not times on a scoreboard. Legacy is presence. It's in the way her competitors talk about her, not with awe, but with affection. With respect that comes not from domination, but from dignity. It's in how her achievements live without need for defense. Her presence changed the standard. Her name added a layer of depth to a sport that has often chased youth and flash. She gave it patience, craft, proof that quiet does not mean small. She changed what it meant to lead, not from the front of a press conference, but from the back of a lane. Sometimes, greatness isn't obvious. It doesn't arrive with fire. It builds like music's, layered, returning to a single note that lingers long after the orchestra stops. Katie's note was water.cool, constant, true. Years from now, when her name is carved beside champions, some will recite her medals, her times, her records. But others, those who know, will speak of different things, of a girl who never missed practice, of a leader who picked up the cones after a session, of a swimmer who went to bed early, wrote thank you notes to meet organizers, and smiled when no one was looking, of someone who gave her sport not just her stroke but her character, and maybe that's the greatest kind of legacy, not the roar that fills arenas, but the ripple that remains long after the race ends. Picture it. A lane at dawn, mist rising just above the surface, the reflection of ceiling lights broken gently by a familiar silhouette. She dives in, not to win, but to feel the water say, once again, you're home.